Hey there, friends. Welcome to the Taking Your Next Step podcast from Collegians for Christ. Through each episode, we will journey together focusing on knowing what you believe and why you believe it. If you are eager, like I am, to strengthen your faith, then take your next step now by joining us in today's episode. So as we continue our study through the book of Nehemiah, I love the lessons that I can learn from Nehemiah's life about leadership. And just because we're talking about leadership, it doesn't mean per se you have to be in a leadership position. We've talked about how we define leadership as influence. A position doesn't guarantee leadership. It's the influence that you and I have with other people. So even if you don't find yourself per se in the CEO position, a manager position, do not minimize these studies and the application we can learn from Nehemiah's life, because we're all called to lead. We're all called as believers, as followers of Jesus Christ, to influence other people. And whether right now at this moment you have that position of leadership, it may come down the road. Your position of leadership may be second, third, fourth, in charge. But regardless, every single one of us, as my listeners and myself, are called to be leaders. And as Nehemiah moves forward, they're working to rebuild these walls. He has motivated and he's delegated the work. We saw some slight opposition come in, but now we're going to do this study and we're going to see a lot of opposition, a lot of criticism, a lot of work to try to stop the rebuilding of the wall. So we'll see the opposition that leaders face. One quote says this: "The door of success swings on the hinge of opposition." So we understand leaders will face opposition. Sometimes it's from within, sometimes it's from without. And how you and I deal with opposition is a determining factor to our leadership capabilities. It's interesting, as Paul was trying to plant the church at Ephesus, he says this in 1 Corinthians 16, "But I will tarry at Ephesus until Pentecost, for a great door and effectual is open unto me." But he doesn't stop there, and he says, "And there are many adversaries." So we understand when God is doing a great work, there will be adversaries. Why? Because Satan is working. Satan is trying to hinder the work that God is trying to do. And so we come to Nehemiah chapter 4, and we'll see here the reaction of the enemy. "But it came to pass that when Sanballat heard that we builded the wall," guess what his response was? He was wroth and took great indignation and mocked the Jews. "And he spake before his brethren in the army of Samaria and said, What do these feeble Jews? Will they fortify themselves? Will they sacrifice? Will they make an end in a day? Will they revive the stones out of the heaps of the rubbish which are burned?" And so Sanballat's reaction is he was wroth. He was very, very angry at what was going on. Why is he so angry? Well, Sanballat is the governor of the Samaritans. And guess what? The Samaritans were enemies of the Jews. So a powerful Jerusalem means a despised Samaria. Well, a destroyed Jerusalem means a thriving Samaria. And so sometimes people will get angry, or they will try to hinder your progress because they don't like you bettering yourself. They don't like to see you get the promotion. Maybe it was not their idea. And so many times it's envy, it's jealousy, it's pride at the root. But here Sanballat begins to get very angry. He begins to stir up others against the Jews. We see in verse 3, "Now Tobiah the Ammonite was by him, and he said, Even that which they build, if a fox go up, he shall even break down their stone wall." So it's interesting that Sanballat couldn't do much by himself, so he had to begin to recruit others. And so opposition likely comes with many faces, but we see Nehemiah's response to this opposition. How did Nehemiah even know about Sanballat's plot? It's interesting. In verse number 4, it says, "Hear, O our God, for we are despised, and turn their reproach upon their own head, and give them for a prey in the land of captivity." And so obviously Nehemiah is wise. He had people watching, listening, and reporting back to him. He knew what was going on. He knew opposition would come. So guess what? Nehemiah prepared for it. So Nehemiah's response was he prayed. He took the matter instantly to God in prayer. "Hear, O God, hear our prayer." He prays that they will reap what they sow. Now, Nehemiah's prayer doesn't seem super theological here. If we go into verse 5, it says, "And cover not their iniquity, and let not their sin be blotted out from before thee. For they have provoked thee to anger before the builders." Now, when you first look at this prayer, it doesn't seem like it's theologically sound. And what I mean by that is, aren't we supposed to pray that that God will forgive people's sins? Aren't we supposed to pray that they will repent? And here Nehemiah is saying, look, don't forgive their sin. Don't cover it. So what is going on here? Well, one, Nehemiah is venting, if you will, to God. Too many times we react in emotion and we vent on the people and we cause worse situations. We cause more anger to be built into the situation. Nehemiah vented to God because many times, think about it. If you have your emotions going in a response, if you'll sleep on it for a day, many times you feel different the next day and you'll respond differently. But sometimes we respond in the heat of the moment. And so sometimes we need to just go to God and vent out that prayer, or vent out that frustration and anger through prayer. God already knows how we feel. And so that's what Nehemiah is doing. He's venting it out, and rather than on the enemy, which is very wise. And also he's saying, God, just give them what they deserve. God, this is what they're doing. You see what they're doing. They're opposed against your work. You've called me to do this. So God, you let them to reap what they sow. And so Nehemiah prays and he just moves forward. Nehemiah remains focused on what God called him to do. He continues to encourage and motivate the people. And we see that, verse 6, so built we the wall, and all the wall was joined together unto the half thereof, for the people had a mind to work. And so Nehemiah prayed, he's encouraging, he's moving forward. He continues to encourage and motivate the people. Right here, the people could have become very discouraged, negative, and defeated. And if that had happened, the building of the wall would have stopped. And so after the response of Nehemiah, next we see the opposition ramps up. It doesn't stop. And so, but it came to pass that when Sanballat and Tobiah and the Arabians and the Ammonites and the Ashdodites heard that the walls of Jerusalem were made up and the breaches began to be stopped, then they were very wroth. And watch this, and conspired all of them together to come and to fight against Jerusalem and to hinder it. And so here the opposition joined forces. The opposition had now grown and was beginning to make a very offensive military strategy. You know, you and I may not be in the situation of rebuilding walls physically in a city and needing to set up a military or having a military come against us, but many times we may be in the workplace, we may be in our community, we may be leading a ministry, we may even be in church, and unfortunately opposition can come against you. And sometimes that opposition is from within, and sometimes it's from without. But many times the opposition will try to join forces. The gossip spreads. They try to get more people on their side. I mean, you see church splits, you see family splits, you see things that go on in the community politically and so forth. And so we see the opposition grows here, and they're doing all they can to stop the work. And can I say this? The opposition caused the work to stop for a moment. You see, Sanballat's gossip was leaked into Jerusalem, and the result of this was fear. It destroyed their spirit. It destroyed their resolve to work. Even some of the Jews began to spread it. In verse 11, and our adversary said, they shall not know, neither see, till we come in the midst among them and slay them and cause the work to cease. And it came to pass that when the Jews which dwelt by them came, they said unto us 10 times, from all places whence ye shall return unto us, they will be upon you. So even their own people began to get discouraged and began to spread the gossip. The people felt surrounded. They felt defeated. They felt rebuilding was a ridiculous idea and would not be able to complete it. That was the aim of the enemy. They wanted them to, scare them, a scare tactic, destroy their spirit and their resolve to work. And many times people will do that. They'll try to make you feel like your idea doesn't make sense, that your idea was a waste of time. It was a waste of energy, waste of finances. What you're trying to do moving forward in this, whatever it is, critics will come against you trying to discourage you with their words. And when they can't discourage you enough, they'll try to get other people on board with it. Well, how does Nehemiah react? That's what we see lastly here. He does two things. Number one, he encourages and he motivates. You see, the key to Nehemiah's success hinges on this moment. When the criticism came, how will you and I respond when the critics are there, when Satan's in our ear, even when we're in our own head? Sometimes it may not even be other people. It may be just us in our own head. Well, here Nehemiah's success hinges on this moment. He correctly diagnoses the problem. What is the problem? Is fear. So what does he do? Verse 13, therefore said I in the lower places behind the wall and on the higher places, I set people after their families with their swords, their spears, and their bows. And so here he does a very wise thing. And he says this in verse 14, and fight for your brethren, your sons and your daughters, your wives, and your houses. So he lets them know that the enemy is just trying to scare them, and he provides an immediate solution to remove the fear. Sometimes you and I need to go to God's word and claim his promises to remove the fear. Sometimes we need to remember what God has called us to. Sometimes we need to remember how God is leading. Sometimes we need to remember that sometimes the voices on the outside are not right. And so we have to remember what our goal is. Sometimes we have to refocus through the distractions and say, what was the goal in this project? What was the goal in me doing this? And he arms them and reminds them that their great God is fighting for them. And he motivates the people. So he puts a plan in place to protect the people and the work. And he puts them there after their families. That is so important. Why? They are to guard and build that which is most valuable to them. He encourages them to fight for what is most important to them. And so as we walk through this passage, there's a lot of opposition going on. There's a lot of godly reaction from Nehemiah. And we understand this: leaders will face opposition, and opposition will come in all different types of faces. You experience opposition. You will if you're leading something. You will if it's just critics. That becomes opposition. You will if it's just Satan trying to discourage and trying to destroy. But how you and I handle it will determine much about our leadership, and also it will determine whether the project, ministry, job, whatever it is completed. So we must confront the opposition. I think the greatest thing sometimes is to just hope it goes away. And sometimes that is it. We don't want to respond sometimes. We've talked about that a little bit. Sometimes we need to respond. Sometimes we need to ice the situation for a day so that we can respond not in emotion and anger. Sometimes we need to walk away from it. But the thing is, we cannot just hope it goes away. Sometimes we need to confront the opposition with wisdom, not emotion. We need to recognize the opposition. We need to diagnose the opposition and plan or try to figure out how we can fix the issue. And a true leader just does not ignore it and hope that it disappears. So as you find yourself leading in whatever capacity it is, understand there will be times when the enemy will attack. And the hardest times, I believe, is when the enemy is from the inside, when it's people you feel should be on your side. And sometimes that's the hardest ones to navigate. Maybe you've seen somebody as a believer that says, God's called me to do this. I'm going to move here. I'm going to change this degree and go to school here, or I'm going to quit my job and do this ministry, or I'm going to go to the mission field. And you hear people that are believers say, what are you doing? Why would you waste? Why would you give up those 3 years of school to add 2 more years? Why would you move there away from family? And you start getting all these voices in your head from within. And sometimes those are the hard ones because you feel like, hey, these people should be for me. These people should be glad that I'm doing these things, or I'm trying to progress myself. Or why would you not take the promotion or take this job over here making less money? It makes no sense. But when you know God is leading you, that's what you have to go back to. You have to go back to what is God called me to do? What is God leading me to do? Go back there so you can destroy, if you will, remove the distractions and the voices, and stay true to what God has called you to do. Thank you for taking the time to listen. If this podcast has been helpful to you, please share it with a friend or subscribe to stay up to date on the latest episodes. You can connect with Collegians for Christ online for more information and resources at cfccampusministry.com.